Okay, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everybody to the webinar today, the Foreclosures Daily webinar with Kevin Sayles. We're going to wait just a few moments and let some people get on. And while we're waiting, I'm going to go over some pre-steps I want to talk to you guys about. There's a little Q&A on your Zoom toolbar. It says Q&A. You just click that if you want to ask a question. Now, I want you guys to feel free to ask questions during the whole entire presentation. And Kevin has asked that when you do ask a question, you put your state down because there's different rules and regulations in each state. Just to see if you guys can hear me on Q&A, just put yes, I can hear you or something. Okay, thank you. I got a yes. Thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate that. So go ahead and ask questions during the whole presentation. It is not going to interrupt Kevin or myself in any way. We want you to ask questions while you're thinking about it, so that way you don't forget your question in the end. And we are going to open it up to Q&A in the end. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to do the introductions. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Foreclosures Daily, where we came from, who we are, what we can offer. And then I'm going to turn it right over to Kevin, and he's going to do about an hour presentation and open it up to Q&A as well. When he opens it up to Q&A, that's when we'll look at all your questions that you sent in during the whole presentation. Also, I do want to let you know we're going to be running some specials for anybody who is attended this webinar today. From now until Monday, we are going to do a buy one, get one free on discounted rate, and that's something that we never ever do. And that's just for being on the webinar with Kevin Sayles and I today. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start with a slideshow presentation. Foreclosures Daily has been in business for a very long time. And since then, we have been the internet's #1 destination for the most detailed, timely, and accurate information. I've been with Foreclosures Daily since they opened in 2004, and I have helped many investors, realtors, and attorneys grow their business and increase their revenues. I teach people how to use the different types of leads that we have to offer, such as probates, pre-probates, and so on and so forth. I also teach the do's and don'ts of marketing. I've learned a lot over the years from seasoned investors all the way down to beginning investors. All the best types of ways to market to these people, to get these people to respond. My name is TANGIE. This is my email address. Go ahead and take a picture of it. That's how you get a hold of me if you'd like to ask any questions after the presentation or just reach out to me in some way. We're a nationwide lead provider. We provide leads to investors, realtors, and attorneys, and just your basic first-time home buyer as well. We've been in business since 2004, and since then we've been the internet's #1 destination for the most detailed, timely, and accurate information. Here's how we're different than most other lead providers out there. All of our leads have real estate attached. We do not give you a lead unless there's real estate attached. Other companies out there typically will not do that. They won't farm for real estate. They'll just give you all 300 people that, let's say, file for probate, even if only 15 had property. We're only going to give you the 15 that had property. They're going to give you like all 300. All of our leads are delivered either daily, weekly, or monthly, and most of the data has property appraisers information attached, such as bedrooms, baths, type of property, just your basic information about the house. So we understand the importance of having fresh data that's farmed for real estate, and we're also understand the importance of having it first. So we try to be as quick as we possibly can. Most companies are going to be quarterly and not farming for real estate. We're daily or weekly, and we are farming for real estate. These are some of the leads that we offer here at Foreclosures Daily. I'm just going to go over a few of them, but we do have more, and you can also customize your leads. We have things like probates, pre-probates, absentee owners, inheritance, divorce, tax lates, auctions, list pendants, cash buyers, code violation, evictions, and just some distressed homeowners. We can also customize your leads for you too. So if you want to say, okay, Tangie, I want somebody who's owned their house for more than 15 years and they have at least 40% equity. So you can be real specific like that too. So we can also customize your leads for you. Now, here's some of the things that I do for you. We give you a lot of bonuses when you buy leads from us, and other companies don't typically do things like that. Like, you're going to get a copy of all of the postcards that I recommend, and I'm going to give you a special link right to these postcards and letters. The postcard with the house is real lucrative. A lot of people are really responding to that. You know, your national average response rate is like 1.5%. We've got people getting 3, 5, 10, and 15% response rates with these postcards from Go Big Printing. Now, here's one of the letters that we recommend. It's just a simple, basic handwritten letter. The company will actually handwrite it for you using handwritten font, and they charge you deeply discounted rates. Like they'll send the postcards out for you for like 38 to 42 cents, and they'll send the letter for like 64 cents, and these are all with postage, which is unheard of. Now, some of the bonuses that you get when you purchase leads from us, you'll get things like a 6-step mailing campaign, a 6-touch campaign, phone scripts on how to negotiate with the seller, phone scripts on how to speak to the person and the family members who answer the phone. We'll give you an email to send to the attorney should there be one involved. So you're just going to get a lot of different things. And one of the things you get is the probate book. And this is actually wrote by the author who's on this webinar today, and his name is Kevin Sayles. This is the webinar you joined today. He's the author of Probate Real Estate Sales 101. And anybody who buys leads from us gets a copy of Kevin's book. So we'll also give you special links to receive reduced mail rates and reduced skip tracing services. Like one of the skip tracing services we recommend, and this is really good for pre-probates, they only charge 15 cents and they'll skip trace and give you up to 10 phone numbers and 5 emails. But if you ask them, besides that 15 cents, they'll also give you the surrounding family members in the area and their phone numbers too for free, which is like unheard of. So you'll get the list of family members too in the area on the pre-probates. I don't do raised hands, so if you have a question, please put it in questions and comments. Now, here's some of the pricings on our leads. First of all of our leads are exportable. So you can export the leads to Excel, CSV, Avery 8160 labels. We basically email you every Wednesday to let you know that your leads are ready and available for download. And all you have to do is log in and export them. You can export them right away to Excel or CSV or the mailing labels like I was saying. So the discounted price, just for being on this call today or this webinar, for Kevin, we've lowered the rates to $5.99 when they're typically $7.50 for one county. So you get each of those services is $599 for 3 months, $999 for 6 months, or you can get the whole year for $1,750. Usually we do a buy one, get one free special with the list price, but for Kevin Sayles webinar by Monday, you're gonna get a free county onto these discounted rates that you'd be paying. And that's for each of the services. A lot of people think it's for all of them. So you're going to be getting the leads, one lead choice of your, one leads list of your choice with a free county for these prices right here. And you're going to get to pick like either probate or pre-probate or inheritance or divorce and so on and so forth. And Kevin has awesome probate training to teach you how to work these leads. So this is my contact information. Go ahead and take a picture of it. My phone numbers are down there. We're going to be sending out an email afterwards with a copy of a sales contract in case any of you guys want to sign up for leads. And if you haven't got it and you're wanting it, you can also text me or email me and say, hey, Tangie, I'm ready to sign up. But I'm going to go ahead and introduce Kevin in just a moment. I want to talk about him for just a second. Kevin has been investing since 1997, you guys. And his day job is actually at a title company. And he's the author of not one book, but he's the author of 2 books. One of them is Probate Real Estate Sales 101, which is the one I just showed you. And the other one is The Wholesaler's Guide to Closing Real Estate Deals. And he also does probate training. I'm going to actually introduce Kevin. He's on here now. Kevin, welcome. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let you put your slide up. Thank you so much for being on this call with us today. We really appreciate you taking time out of your precious time to be on our webinar today.
No problem. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me. Tangie, are you able to see my screen?
I can see your screen and I can hear you just fine. I'm going to go ahead and mute my microphone and turn my video off. Take it away and let us know when you're ready for Q&A within the hour.
That sounds great. We'll get started right now. Thank you very much. So glad you guys are here with us on this webinar. Probate real estate is a phenomenal area, a phenomenal niche of the real estate business. And I'd like to start out by talking about why probate is so important. I think it's really important that we understand why we're doing what we do so that it helps us realize the value in what we're doing. So here's the number one thing. Baby boomers are the richest generation ever in the world. They control, I've heard numbers as high as 77% of US wealth. And you tell me, we're all here to invest in real estate. If you control the wealth, of course, you control the real estate. So that's the beautiful thing. Baby boomers control so much of the wealth. Well, the California Department of Health Services put out a study that said a baby boomer dies every 57.9 seconds. Imagine that. Gosh, I think since this webinar started, we've already lost 10 baby boomers. I had to look at my watch, see how many minutes it's been. 10 baby boomers already, 10 people that their wealth needs to transfer to someone else. And so it's a phenomenal rate. For those of you who have been investing since the previous mortgage meltdown, since prior to 2008 and 2007, here's the beautiful thing. You know, when that happened, it changed the market. 97% of what was on the market became REO and became short sale. Everyone had to learn how to deal with REOs, had to learn how to deal with short sales and all the different rules that were coming along. But here's the thing, people are always going to die. That market is not going away. The market is going to be there today, tomorrow, next year, 10 years from now. There's no cure for death. And so there's always going to be a need for the probate industry. Now, it's the largest transfer of wealth ever in history. And there's something new that's coming on now. Hopefully you guys have heard of the iBuyer. If you're aligned with the real estate industry at all the real estate magazines for about the last year and a half have been talking about this, because billions of dollars have been raised and spent on real estate technology. So they're saying there's going to be a change in this industry, just like Uber did to taxis. Uber and Lyft spent about $4 billion in technology, and they took over 70% of the taxi market. If you look at what Expedia did to the travel industry, I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember this, but there was a time when you would walk in a building and you'd walk out with a plane ticket. It was called a travel agency. Now everyone books it online, right? That disruption of that market, that change in the way business is done, has not hit real estate. It's really the last service industry to have this change. And the iBuyer is one of these types of changes that are coming along. Now, here's the point for us that are real estate investors. iBuyers, I see on the screen right here, Open Door and OfferPad. I believe those two, one of them raised $375 million. The other one raised $415 million. I don't remember which is which anymore. That was about 2 years ago. The money was raised for one reason: to buy single family real estate. They're competing directly with us investors. And I don't know about you, but my proof of funds does not go up to $415 million. And so they are strong buyers and they bring strong offers. It can cause a challenging situation for people that are competing against them. Now, I want to start though with what is probate. And before I get into this, I'm going to tell you a couple of stories through this call. I'm going to talk about a client that I work with in the past named David, another one named Bill, another one named Jason. Jason, in fact, used the probate leads from Foreclosures Daily and Probates Daily. So you'll love his story. But I'm going to tell these stories, and the reason is not just to tell a story. The reason is to help you learn from their mistakes or their things they did right, and to learn from the things that they learned from, the things that they did that were successful. Okay. So we'll introduce those. David is, he's probably a 25-year veteran in the real estate industry. He's a broker. He owns a real estate company, but you know, he knows, quote unquote, I'm putting my air quotes, I'm not sure if you guys can see me. He knows real estate, right? Bill, been in the industry less time, probably more like 9 years, knows quite a bit about real estate, been investing and doing deals in real estate for quite a while. Been around the block, not a newbie, but not, you know, a 20-year veteran like David. And then Jason's brand new. When I first met Jason, he was in his first year in business, and I'm going to talk about one of the deals he did, and that was in his first year and a half in business for sure. And he's had a lot of success since then. So let's talk about what's probate. Probate is the gathering of a deceased person's assets. You got to find what are all their assets, what are the bank accounts, what are the properties, cars, all their assets, and then figuring out, okay, what debts that they had need to be paid, paying off those debts, and then taking whatever money's left over and giving it over to the children. In many of the states, this is going to be a court procedure. Usually probate is referring to the court procedure, but there's also in a lot of states, different ways things can be done without probate. And I'll talk about some of the variations state by state as we get into the presentation. But that's the general understanding of what probate is. How much probate business is there? This information on the screen now, I'm sorry it's so thin and narrow, but that's the way this infographic was created. The information on the screen right now, this is information from the court filing data from these states. And most of it's 2015 data because I think this data is produced every 5 years, so I might be able to update it this year. But if you look at the sheer numbers, 44,000 probate cases in California, 55,000 cases in Florida, 99 in Texas. I have the 10 most populous states here on this list, but it's just a ton of probate cases that are filed every year. Wisconsin, 40,000 cases. You know, and all of these are not going to have real estate. All of these are not going to sell, but think about this. All of these are a situation where probably someone died or became incapacitated and can't handle their real estate, their finances. And there's likely real estate that needs to transfer hands. It's a beautiful situation. Here's the other thing that's awesome about probate real estate. Probate is the ultimate distressed property. If you have a foreclosure, that person can get, go back to work. Maybe they got laid off and they go back to work now, and maybe they're going to get a forbearance. They could do a loan mod. They could do short sale. There's other ways out. With probate, usually that death is what causes the sale. And so there's the sales, there's no other way out. A couple of my books that I've written, I'm not going to go over this in detail because Tangie already introduced me, but I've been in the business. I cut my teeth on probate in 1995, started in the business in a kind of lending environment in 1993, cut my teeth as a bank manager dealing with probate cases in 1995, and I've taken and run with it since then, and I work at a closing agent now. So why are there such good deals in probate? I think this is a very important question, and people always ask this, so I added it into my presentations now because someone's going to ask some questions that are related to this, so I might as well cover it up front. Number one, in some cases, you're dealing with other people's property. I'll give you an example. An administrator of an estate said to me and her real estate agent, we were all on the phone, she was through with this. She was like a vice president at some tech company up in Northern California in the tech, Silicon Valley area. And I'm going to try to say this word for word. She said, listen to me. Sell the property for $400, sell the property for $450. I don't care. I want the property sold. I need this situation out of my hair. She was the administrator. She was sharing the estate with 4 of her siblings. There was 5, it was either 5 or 6 kids total. So, $50,000 only means an extra 10 grand for her because her siblings are going to get another 10 grand. This was a headache for her. She was like, look, we're all coming into a landslide. I think they had a loan, so they weren't even going to get all 450. She's like, it makes a slight difference in what we inherit. I need this situation done. How many of you on this webinar would like to deal with that seller? I know I would. And a lot of times people just they want some cash quick. So that's why they want to get out of it. They're looking for a deal quick, and it's a great situation to be in as a buyer. It's the ultimate distressed property. I just talked about that a moment ago. I've had probate cases where they're ordered to sell. I have cases where there's no getting out of the case. There's a lawsuit open and it's not going to close until they sell the property. I've had other situations where they have to sell because they're going to go into foreclosure. Many times they have no other choice but to sell the property, and it puts you at an advantage as a buyer. And then last, many of the properties are in subpar condition. I've seen it run the gambit from the seller who died, who one of my clients, she knew the guy while he was alive. He had a nice car, a Jeep Cherokee that was in great condition. You see him, he was always clean and dressed. When they went to his house, unbelievable. There was a lane, like you had to walk through this one path in the house because there was newspapers and boxes and trash and rats decaying in the carpet all over the house. He was a pack rat that had, they showed a picture of the garage. The garage was piled to the top of the garage door with trash. Like if you open the garage door, you would have to step back because you think the whole thing all that trash is going to collapse on you. You couldn't even step in there. It's unbelievable. So you have those people that are pack rats and have so much junk. And that's an investor's dream, right? Because it's easy to take all the junk out. And then when you take all the junk out, you realize, oh, the house really isn't so bad sometimes. To the houses where there's been damage, the roof started leaking in the back bedroom back in the mid 90s. And so they haven't used that bedroom and they just keep that door closed since the 90s, or we had one property where I had the person send the picture of the clouds in the sky to the attorney so that they could let the attorney know that picture of the clouds in the sky is taken inside the house through the hole in the ceiling, in the roof, so that they would know you guys need to move quickly because all this rain we've been getting, we don't get a lot of rain in California, but that was it was a couple years ago when we were getting rain like every week. And it's like, you got to let them know all that water is coming in the house. So you get these subpar conditions for various different reasons. And that creates a discounted price for you because the beat up, as investors, our dream is the neighborhood where all the comps, I'm sorry, I throw out California numbers because here a regular normal house is 700 grand. So, that might be 200 grand in the state where you are, the area where you are. But a neighborhood of $700,000 houses, and then this beat up one where, maybe grandma had the property and she got sick 15 years ago and hasn't been able to keep it up to date since then. And so when the back bathroom faucet started leaking, they just kind of shut that bathroom down and no one's even been in that room for 15 years. You get these types of conditions in probate. And then you get the better ones where grandma still lived in it, she died, but it's move-in condition, but it has pink tile from the 60s in it and lime green paint in the bedrooms because, or wallpaper, because that was what was in the 70s. So these conditions help us as investors. So I introduced this concept as the probate umbrella. What is the probate umbrella? What does that mean? What that means is this. Probate covers more than just court-ordered probate cases. It covers this umbrella of different transactions. So I'm going to go over those. One is conservatorship sales. What is a conservatorship? Conservatorship means the person who is the owner of the property, they're still alive, but they cannot handle their financial affairs. They can have a physical disability that prevents them. I had one last week where the guy cannot use his right arm, so he can't sign documents. They could have a mental disability. They could be mentally incapacitated, a brain injury, Alzheimer's, dementia, something like that. They could be in a coma, anything like that where they cannot handle their financial affairs. That falls under this umbrella of probate. And when we're in real estate, we can say probate, but it could mean all these things. And sometimes they're regular sales, but they fall under this probate umbrella. Trust sales, that means the property's in a trust. In certain states, trusts are in high demand. I was talking to an attorney from Texas last year, and he was saying, Texas different from California. We don't recommend that people have a trust and put their properties in a trust, whereas attorneys in California do. Your state may be in one situation or the other. Then you have the probate sales, which are actually going through a court case. The wonderful things about these is you can get the leads. You can contact Probate Daily and get leads. It's not that difficult to get these leads. They're readily available. Then we have ownership affidavit sales, which I can also call other deceased party sales. Many states have a way that you don't have to go through probate to sell a property. I'll cover that a little bit later on some different slides. But also other deceased party sales happen to be those properties where grandma had the property. She got older. She decided to add grandson on the title. It's not always a good thing because of federal income tax or federal capital gains taxes, but sometimes they do that. And when grandma dies, they forget that 10 years ago they added grandson on the property, and now he's the owner. So there's various different ways this can happen. A wife who's on title, husband dies, and then now the wife sells. But oftentimes the death is what causes the sale. So there's a testimonial video on my website that I kind of laugh about. The guy said, Kevin is my go-to guy when someone dies. And I'm like, is that a compliment? I'm not really sure that that's a compliment. I'm gonna take it as a compliment, but it's like, it's kind of a weird way to be thought about. But the beautiful thing in our business, if you want deals to come to you, then if they think of you that way, it's beautiful, because when someone dies, who do they call? You, whether it's a probate or not. So there's some terms we should define. You may hear me say executor. You may hear me say administrator. Some people will say personal representative or estate representative. That just refers to the person in charge of the estate. Usually they're called estate representative or personal representative as more of a generic term, or before they're actually given the court powers. Executor means they're appointed by a will. Administrator means they're appointed by a court. So they all typically have the same. They mean the person in charge. They mean that's the person that's going to sign your contract. If they're an executor, it means the will designated them. But those terms are kind of interchangeable, so you might hear me interchange them sometimes. The will, that's the document. It's an estate planning tool. It's the document that states how my assets and stuff are going to be taken care of and distributed when I die. Testate means to die with an estate plan or a will. Intestate means to die without one. So those are some terms that are important. The other terms, trust. A trust is a document that provides for a property being held by someone for someone else. So my son can be the trustee of a property that's for me, right? Or I could be the trustee of property that's for my benefit while I'm alive, and then when I die, it's for the benefit of my children. So that's a trust. A trust has a grantor or trustor, that's the person who creates the trust, and then a trustee, that's the person that's in charge of the trust, and then a successor tree, that's the person that when the trustee dies, takes over. And I get people all the time that say they call or they ask a question. I was on a webinar yesterday, and the question came in something like this. When the trustee dies, does the executor take over, blah, blah, blah. And so they were mixing probate terms with trust terms. And so I used to not always define trust terms as much, but now I started doing that because I see more and more people are mixing the terms. They'll call, hey, Kevin, I got this trust and blah, blah, blah. And the executor of the trust, well, there is no executor of the trust. So is he an executor, which means it's a probate, or is he a trustee, which means it's a trust? So I just want to clarify that so we can keep those things straight. So where do we start? we start right where TANGIE came in. We start at the beginning with the leads. And every time I see a slide like that, or go on Probate's Daily website, I see the leads that they offer. So many phenomenal, really good leads. And that's why they're the only lead generation company that I promote nationwide, because their leads are good. Like she said, they're vetted for real estate. So it's awesome stuff. So we start at the start. It starts with leads. Buy them from Probate's Daily, and then you have instantly on your computer a bunch of people to call. People have said, well, I can go to the courthouse. Yeah, you can, but I'm in Los Angeles, right? So we have traffic and all that. Now with this COVID-19 and everything going on, we don't have traffic, but normally there's traffic. Most places, by the time you get to the courthouse, you may have to pay for parking, spend the time to go inside the courthouse, generate your own leads, and walk out with probably far less leads than you would have gotten weekly from Probate's Daily. It's not worth the time. Our time is money. Our time is ours. If you look at the ability to be able to stay home, click a button, and I download all the leads right there on the spot, I'm saving tons of time, which is tons of money. But there, in some areas, there may be other ways to generate leads. I can't really go over a whole lot of examples because it's different in every state, but I've coached clients in different states that, I did a coaching call. There was people from, I think, 6 different states represented on that call, 5 or 6 different states. And the guy in Florida had an easy way to generate some leads in his county, but not in the county next to him. The lady in Pennsylvania had 2 counties that she worked, and in both of those counties she could generate leads, but the adjacent counties she could not. So it varies everywhere, and that's going to be different depending on where you are. One thing that I think is outstanding and phenomenal, I've been in this business, I've been working for closing agents for 21 years, and in my role there, I'm a vice president at a title insurance company. I'm the probate expert, and I advise and consult and assist real estate professionals, real estate agents, brokers, escrows, lenders, and a ton of investors. And one thing that's been consistent, especially from the investors, is, well, how do I get these leads before everyone else? How do I get these leads sooner? When I call, someone else is called. Number one, you don't always want to be first to market. Okay, because I don't know what percentage of the smartphone market Apple has, but there's 2 companies, Apple and Android. And a lot of people say Android is better. I'm an Apple guy myself. I'm not going to argue that situation right now. The point is, I don't know, it's probably not 50-50, but it's probably pretty close. Apple was first, but another company came in and took over around 50% of the market. And there's a lot of ways that you could say a Droid is better. So being first is the hardest thing to do, but it doesn't even guarantee you the deal. Being better is, I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's easier than trying to be first, and it helps you be the best. And that's what I focus on with my folks. But for those of you who still want to be first, the pre-probate leads are the way to be first. The pre-probate leads tell you when someone died and they own real property. So imagine that the owner of the property died, and now I get that as a lead. Because one way or another, they're going to have to do something. And one of the things that I teach is how to turn, you're going to get some that are going to be a deal for you. If you get 1 out of 100, you're doing awesome. If you get 3, you're doing a really good job. But what if you could turn 17, 18, 20 of those other leads into something that either pays you now or pays you in the future? That's what it's all about. So I love the pre-probate leads. Now, one thing I say with all leads, any lead that has to do with probate, I learned this over time after dealing with case after case where the person died 15, 20 years ago and they've never probated the estate, is that a lot of times they're sitting on their hands not doing anything because they don't have the money. So if you offer to assist them with the probate, and I'll get into details on that in another webinar, but if you offer that, a lot of times it doesn't mean a whole lot of money on your part. A lot of times it's a small advance or just paying a filing fee or something like that. And in most states, they're going to have a way to waive court fees for people who are financially unable. So it's something you can offer, and it doesn't usually cost you a whole lot of money to be able to get the deal. So find out what their needs are. That's the most important thing. Hey, with probates and any leads, if you find out what they want, it will give you a huge benefit. It will give you a huge benefit because that's the key, the golden key to the lock to get them to work with you. And I talk more about that in marketing webinars, so I'll just end from there. Probates Daily has a code that if you come through my training, use this code KS101. The deal that they have going on right now, I think, is better than the deal if you use my code, so you don't have to use it, but this will be phenomenal if you guys get their leads over this weekend. So there's 3 phases of probate. I'm going to come back to this in a little while, but those 3 phases of probate generally are the appointment phase, where they appoint someone to be in charge, the administration phase, and that usually is, some states it might be 15, 20 days, usually 1 to 60 days is a good estimate. with COVID-19, some states, some courthouses, county by county, it's different, but some courthouses are closed. So it may delay some of these timelines, but generally speaking, in 1 to 60 days, the person is appointed and put in charge, meaning they have the power to sell. In phase 2, it's generally speaking 2 to 8 months. That's where they do all the administration and they do all the figuring out what debts and what assets the person has. And then in phase 3 is where they close the case. So it can be around 18 months. But the beautiful part is usually when the appointment happens in that day 60-ish time period, that's when you can close a real estate deal. So you don't have to wait. It's funny because when I do live workshops, it's hard on a webinar, but when I do live workshops, I'll ask all the time, do you think you can, when do you think you can sell? And a lot of people think you have to wait and go to the end and all that. And it's really interesting that people don't understand. I'll ask another question in just a moment, but I don't want to give away the answer yet. So let's look at this. Who's typically, when the person dies, who's typically in charge? Succession laws are different in every state, right? We all understand that. What I've learned in doing business nationwide is that we're not really the United States of America. We're really more like the United Countries of America because the laws can be so different in different states. I could talk about gun laws or marijuana laws, and you can't transfer that over a state line. It's like you're going into a different country, but it's interesting. So the succession laws may be different state by state, but typically the first person that's going to be in charge is going to be a spouse of the decedent or a child of the decedent. And I think that's kind of obvious. We get that, my children are my direct heir, but if there's a spouse, they usually have some say. Different in every state. Now, most of us, I'm sure all of us on this webinar can understand this, right? So I mentioned to you, David, he's the guy that's a broker, been around 25 years, knows a lot about the real estate business. He has this transaction, and the person he's talking to is the nephew of the decedent. And let me actually clarify that, because a lot of times when it comes to probate laws, they differentiate between my nephew and my wife's nephew. There would be a difference, okay? In this case, it's a little different, a little even farther removed, because it's not the decedent's nephew, it's the nephew of the predeceased spouse. So his wife had died a few years earlier, and it's actually her nephew, but this is the only person he can find. So point comes up. Here's the question. Is a child of the decedent a closer relative than a nephew? You guys are probably looking at me going, why the heck would you answer that? Everyone knows my child is a closer relative to me than my brother or sister's child, right? That's obvious, let alone the fact that this is his wife's brother or sister's child, right? It's like an in-law's child. Okay, point being, David was banking everything on his deal, his contract, everything on this nephew without doing the background research he should have done. Tangie mentioned skip tracing. Skip tracing is an important tool in probate because had David done some of this skip tracing, which is one of the things I teach people to do, had he done that, he would have known that there was actually someone else involved. There was actually a child of the decedent. That child is a closer relative than the nephew, obviously. If the predeceased spouse had a child, in most states, that predeceased spouse's child, the stepchild of the decedent, would have been a closer relative than this nephew. He ended up losing that deal. And I'll talk more about David and how it came out and the problems with this in a little bit, but it's kind of obvious to a lot of us, but people don't realize, how this could have come out. So the heir or the person who's first to be in charge of this estate could be designated in a will or trust as well. So you want to always ask if there's any documentation, any estate plan that the person had, because that may dictate who's in charge of the estate. All right, letters testamentary or letters of administration. Your state may call it something different. It's usually the first thing you want to attain. It's what puts the person in charge of the estate. Some states put the person in charge by an order for probate. Other states will have an order for probate and then letters later. I'm going to show a couple states' letters. These are what letters look like in Texas. And it's a little blurry because this document, when I put it in the slideshow, it looks a little bad. So I'm going to put my reading glasses on. It's pretty clear of what it says. Suzanne Henderson, the clerk of the probate court in Tarrant County, which is where Dallas is, I think, on such and such day, puts in this gentleman who qualifies as independent executor for the estate of the decedent. That's essentially all it says. You look at it to make sure it has seals on it and signatures from the proper people so that we know it's valid. This one is what a California letters look like. And it's funny because they call them letters as though there's multiple pages or it's multiple documents. It's one page document. It just says you're in charge, kind of simple. But this one has a box here, third one down from the screen, saying this person is the decedent, right? It's the person who's on title to the property. Box number 2 shows the court appoints this person as the person to be in charge. And box number 3 says the personal representative, which is the person in box 2, will have full authority. There's a thing called Independent Administration in the States Act. Most states will utilize independent administration as the primary way. California's right, I don't know, roughly, I don't have an exact statistic on this. This is kind of my estimation and the estimation of some other experts I know in this business, but around 60% are independent, and the 40% require some court supervision or court oversight before closing. So most states will have an independent way, which is going to be very similar to a regular sale. When I say very similar, there might be a couple, like you might have to have a certified copy of this document in order to close your transaction, but there's no additional stuff. There might be a notice that has to go out to the heirs or something like that, or a publication. But a lot of times that stuff is happening in the background between the attorney and your administrator or executor, and it's not part that you have to worry about as the investor. So that's the beautiful thing about these. In most states, like in some states, it's like 85–90% are done with independent administration, where they don't have to go back to the court to verify the sale. And then different states vary. So I'll go over some of those differences in a little bit. So your administrator or executor, they may sell on their own or they may require court approval. Typically, there are, in I think every state, there's some requirement to publish the fact that there's a probate and publish the fact that there's a sale of real property. So some people use that as their leads, right? They get those newspapers or go on the websites of those small metropolitan, usually most courthouses, like you have to file a DBA if you have a DBA in your state, and doing business as, and when you go to the courthouse or the recorder's office to file those, there's all these people saying, do you need to run an ad? Are you filing a DBA? Do you need to run the ad? It's those small local newspapers. Like, it's not the New York Times or the LA Times. It's usually the smaller local papers. So some people use that. I think getting them from a lead generation company, you're getting them way sooner, and you run the risk. Like, a lot of times if you're seeing the ad that they're selling the property, they've already got a real estate agent involved, or they've already got the property going into escrow. It's too late in the game. So that's why buying leads is a better situation. But I just want you to know that the administrator executive is going to usually have some requirement to publish that they're probating and or selling. Let the attorney know once you've accepted offer. So my question is, and this is a very important question, and I don't want you guys to unmute or anything, but you can post maybe in the comment section. How many of you think that when you've knocked on the door, you've called this person, you sent a postcard, however you're reaching out to them, and you've been talking, and now you think you're ready to have a contract? They have powers, they have letters issued. How many of you understand that you should call the attorney first? How many of you understand that you shouldn't? I want you to think about that. It's a very important question, and a lot of people answer that question, and I want to clarify right now. I want to give you my opinion, okay? Because my opinion is that you should get that contract signed. I've seen too many investors, too many even real estates not getting their listing agreements, not get the contract signed, and they're waiting. And yes, it's absolutely correct, but there may be some reason that they can't sell right now. That is true. But the thing is, once you have a contract signed, they have an obligation to sell you that property. I don't know about you, but I don't work for free. I like to get paid for my work. I like to secure my situation in the deal. And so many people that I come across that I'm training, they think, oh yeah, you should probably call the attorney first. They think the attorney's in charge. Listen, that executor or administrator, that person that files this case, they are in charge of everything. They hire or fire their attorney. In the middle of the probate case, they can fire their attorney oftentimes. They hire or fire real estate agents. They select or don't select the person they want to sell the property to. They're in charge. They have the control. Again, there may be some reason they need to delay the sale or do some things before they close the sale, but they're in charge. Once they've been given those powers, once they have those letters, sign your contract. It's better to ask for forgiveness than to beg for permission. And I'll get more into that in a little bit, but I want to talk to you a little bit about Bill. Bill's the guy that I said has about 9 years, maybe a little bit more than that, of experience. He's a person that knows stuff, and I'll tell you the error of his ways. I don't know why, but he calls me about when he gets an email or something about one of my trainings, and he calls me, and I don't know the purpose of his call, because he gets on the phone and he says, Kevin, I don't need to go to your training. I've closed these deals and I've done this and I've done that, and so I don't need to be at your training. And I'm like, okay, you made that statement. What do you want me to do about that? Okay, fine. If you don't need to go, I don't know if he was calling to get me to sell him on my training. I'm not going to sell you on it. You either understand that you got to sharpen your axe or you don't. So I'm like, okay, cool. And we wrapped up our conversation. We knew each other before this call, but for whatever reason, he called me for that. I'm like, that's so stupid, because I know, I've trained people that have been doing probate deals for years. 2 weeks ago, a guy was on a webinar, and I told this guy, this webinar is going to be more basic. You probably don't need to be on it. He got on it anyway, and he called me afterwards. He goes, Kevin, oh my God, you said something that made me think about this. You taught me something, boom, boom, boom. Next thing I know, he's got a deal that he thought was a dead deal because of what I trained him on that webinar. Now it's going to be a deal for him. So Bill doesn't go to my training. Fast forward to last year, he calls me in August, September time period about a deal that he's trying to put together. Now, this person got letters in February, March. This is September. You guys are going through my training. You guys now know. And look, if you want to take my advice or don't, that's up to you. I don't tell grown people what they have to do. I have the mindset, if there's a big hole outside and I tell you, don't go outside because there's a hole, you fall in it. If you're grown and you go out there, I'm not going to tackle you and keep you from going outside. I told you there's a hole out there. If you want to walk out and fall in it, that's on you. Because he's too sharp to go to training, doesn't go to the training. They get their letters in March. You guys know what to do. They got their letters. What does it say here? Sign the contract, and then let the attorney know once you've accepted the offer, once you've signed the contract. Sign the contract and then send it to the attorney and go, hey, we signed the contract. We're going to be moving forward, right? Let the attorney say, oh, we need to slow down because we got to do this publication. Cool, no problem. I'll extend it. I don't mind extending the escrow. It keeps you locked in. So 6-7 months after they had the power to sell the property, he still doesn't have a contract. And on that call, I said, you need to hang up with me and go sign the listing agreement. But the problem is, he had been trying to do it on his own all this time. And because he didn't, I don't know if he was going to get a listing agreement or if he was going to get a contract. It's the same thing. Contract to put me in escrow, listing agreement is a contract to list the property. I don't remember if he was buying it or if he was going to list it. But the point is, I said, you need to hang up and go get that contract signed right now. Like, don't do anything. Do you hear what I'm saying? Hang up and drive over there and sign the contract. Well, problem is, because he had delayed so long, one of the other heirs got their own attorney. They were fighting now. So now there's 2 attorneys involved. And now they're trying that attorney was saying they wanted to list it with someone else or get someone else involved on it. So there was going to be an agent involved. He wasn't going to be able to get the contract. And bottom line, because he waited, because he knows so much, he missed out on the deal. I don't want you guys to be like Bill. I don't want you to think that you know, and so you don't do the things that you should do. Once they have their letters, write the contract. All right. Be careful if you're attempting to wholesale, especially if it's a court supervised type of sale where the court is going to be approving a sale. Those you typically cannot wholesale. Typically, if they have independent authority and full authority, you can write in a signable contract, then you should be okay. But just be careful, because the rules in your state may vary, and you don't want to get yourself in a situation where you could lose a deposit or something like that. Of course, use all the proper probate documentation. Attorneys have been known to reject contracts, so they say, nope, I want this on the Association of Realtors contract, even if you're not going through a realtor. So you never know. But remember in that, the administrator has the power. So even though the attorney might say, I want this on the Association of Realtors contract, your seller can say, no, this is the contract we're using. We're going with this one. The attorney can only advise. His client, the executor administrator, does not have to take his advice. Okay, so the beautiful thing about this is, in these phases of probate, around day 60, that's when the sale can take place. So it's not such a long process. You don't have to wait till the end. I mean, the probate case that I consider I cut my teeth on in 1995, the person died in like 86. It was a 9 or 10 year probate case when I came along to it. The beautiful thing is, transactions happen while that's going on. You don't have to wait till the end. All right, this is very important. The court always wants what's in the best interest for the estate. I bring that up. It's kind of like the thing, what's in it for me? You've heard that, WIIFM. Well, think about this one. It's kind of like wife, right? What's in it for the estate? You've got to think about what's in it for the estate. The court doesn't care about you as an investor. The court's responsibility, the probate case responsibility, even if it's a trust, the trustee, everyone involved, the responsibility is to the heirs to make sure they get the best deal for them. Terms might make your offer better than a higher offer, a higher price, right? Because of a faster close, the ability to close and not have an appraisal, the ability to close and not have to worry about inspections or problems and all that kind of stuff. So you want to remember that. Sometimes my terms are why they should accept my offer, not because I have the highest price. And too many investors think the reason this deal's got to go through is because it's a big payday for me. No one gives a crap about your payday. You've got to learn to rework that wording to terms of why the estate should sell it to me, not why I want the property. Hopefully that makes sense to you. It's a very big key. And along that vein, I'm going to take us back to the story of David. My friend, not David from the Bible, my friend David, who was the broker and missed out on this deal. He's the guy that had the nephew. And when it came time for the attorney to start filing some of the paperwork and showing in the case who the heirs were, the attorney can't just take the nephew's word that there's no other heirs. Like, there's no document that you can go to. Well, if you find this document at the county, that tells every person's heirs. There is no such thing. I have 4 children. There's no way any of you would know that unless I tell you. There's no way to know their names. Now, thankfully, with skip tracing software and with things like some companies that do some death and birth records, you may be able to find it easier today than you could 10 or 15 years ago. But the point is, they can't just take the nephew's word for it that there's no heirs. So what does the attorney do? What he's supposed to do, which is to have a company that does like skip tracing or private investigator work, see if there's any other heirs. They found a daughter. The daughter was like, yeah, that's my dad. I didn't know, whatever. Maybe, I don't know if she knew. I didn't know he owned a property, whatever. Long story short, she became everything for this case. The nephew is nothing. The contract David had with this nephew is worthless because that guy has no power in this case. And so he wanted to fight and argue. I'm bringing a lawsuit. I'm going to get this attorney disbarred because he feels like the attorney stole it from him. He's got to realize the attorney didn't steal it from him. The attorney did his job. That's what the attorney has to do. When you have an offer with a potential administrator, you got to understand the attorney's going to do his job, and he has to tell his client, which is not you. Realize you're on the other side of his client. Most of the time, the attorneys won't talk to you or cannot talk to you because of their ethical responsibility. The attorney is going to not want to deal with you and your side. He's got to advise his client, and he's going to tell the attorney, his client, you should list this property. You might get better offers. You might get higher offers. You should expose it to the whole market. Well, that's why there's certain things you have to understand about why I've got to position my offer as though it's in the best interest for the estate and make it be in the best interest for the estate. I teach that. It's a much longer situation, but I do teach that. So remember, probate is procedural, and you've got to understand the procedures. I think about this, like, is it complex? No, I mean, tying shoes. How many of us would say tying shoes is not complex, right? We could all do it with our eyes closed. We might even be able to do it with one eye. I mean, with one hand, right? But there's a procedure to it, isn't there? I have a niece that I've recently been teaching to tie her shoes. I mean, she broke down and cried. She said she couldn't do it. She had a breakdown, but for us, tying shoes is simple. We could be talking, chewing gum, have our eyes closed, and tie our shoes. But there's a procedure. You have to take each lace in each hand. You fold one over, wrap it under, pull it through, get that as tight as you can. Then you make a rabbit ear, as I call it with my niece. You throw the other one around, pull it under the rabbit ear, pull those together, and you got a tied knot. There's a procedure. If I don't pull the 2 strings apart and wrap one over the other, it makes it difficult for me to do the rest of the procedure. So the beautiful thing is, once you know how to do it, it becomes easy. So is there a learning curve? Yes. Do you have to sharpen your axe? Yes. And I'm talking about not only on the procedure for probate, but on the marketing side, how I market, how I position myself, how I get that leverage with a person so that no one else can get this deal. There are things you have to learn. There's a learning curve there. And when you learn those things, it helps you. My poor guy, Bill, lost his deal because he didn't have that learning curve. My poor guy, David, lost his deal because of that. I mentioned I was going to talk about Jason. Jason is a guy that I met him by him coming to one of my workshops, probably had to be 2.5 years ago or so, maybe almost 3 years ago. because I think he has 3 or 4 years in the business now. He was in his first year in the business. And he took the time to learn what he has to do, especially when it comes on the marketing side. And so he had this transaction. He knocks on the door, and the first words out of the lady's house is, "You're the 30th," exact words, "You are the 30th person who's come to my door about this property." 30th. Now, I don't know if it's exactly 30, but what that tells you is a ton of people had come there. He was not first. But what he had learned from me is how to be best. And what he did different, which is one of the things that I teach people, is how to share information that helps them and gives them options. He particularly gave them options about their foreclosure situation. He shared that information. He was the only person that did it. This is a very competitive market. Very, in California, we have high prices. Median prices, I think $565 or something like that. This property, year and a half, two and a half years ago was $450. So this was an entry-level price. Tons of people want it. Highly competitive market. But because he gave her options and had a different approach, he was able to get the meeting with her, and she listened with him. And before they closed, I think the investor that bought this property, before they closed, she said, "The reason I went with you and Jason is because you were the only ones that didn't just come tell me I had to sell the property." And so that's the beautiful thing. So it's a little counterintuitive, right? I'm knocking on the door because I want to buy the property, but I have to talk to you about things other than me buying the property. Yes, that's the way it goes sometimes. In the last market after the mortgage meltdown, 95% of properties on the market were either REO or short sale. Almost all the all the short sales started out as loan mods. So if you wanted to get that deal, you had to start out helping the person get a loan mod. They weren't going to qualify, and then it ended up being a short sale. All right, so let's talk about some variations state by state, okay? In North Carolina, real property isn't even part of the probate estate. So they could probate all the other things in the estate, but the real property doesn't go in there. It goes through intestacy laws. That's really odd. It's different than every other state, so it's kind of totally out there. Florida, homestead laws in Florida can supersede vesting in a trust. So like I have my property in a trust, and I die, and I'm in Florida, and if that's the property we lived in, my wife would get the property. It would not pass as it does in the trust. Totally different than California and maybe many other states. Totally different, but that's the way the law works in Florida. Illinois, Texas, and likely many other states, you can pass property. The kids of the decedent can sell a property through things like ownership affidavits or without going through probate. It's absolutely not that way in other states. Washington, for sure. California, for sure. In these states, unless things have changed in the last few years, in these states, you would have to go through probate. I know Washington for sure because my mom was the only child of my grandparents. They had a property. She's the only child, and it still had to go through probate even though she was the only child. Whereas I just closed on a property in Illinois in January of this year, and the property was in the name of the deceased mother. The 2 kids lived on the top floor. One brother lived on the top floor, the other sister lived on the bottom floor, and they sold the property without having to go through probate. There's some paperwork they filled out, and we're ready to go. That's a variation. California, Washington, they would have to go through a court-ordered process called probate. California, there's no will. Matter of fact, if there's a will or if there's no will, either way, they're going to probate for sure if there's no trust. Washington, the properties typically have to go through a bidding process. That transaction I had for my mother, we had to hold an auction to bid to sell the property. So we had to do that before we could actually sell, and it didn't sell via the auction. So we ended up selling it from the listing agent after that, but it went through an auction. Imagine that, it didn't sell. So someone could have come in with a low bid and bid on it, but no one bid. It was a vacant lot, kind of an odd property, but sold for quite a price. There were, last I checked, 23 states that had transfer on death deeds. I think in Texas, they call them ladybird deeds. They may be called something different. Here in California, they're called TOD or revocable TOD, transfer on death deeds. Those are deeds that you record that have no impact on the property or taxes or anything while the person's alive. But when the person dies, it transfers the property over to whoever they designate. Those usually have a lot of peculiar and particular rules. Like in California, it must be recorded within a certain amount of time. So you got to be careful of those things. There's a thing called the Uniform Probate Code. 16-ish states have adopted it, according to Wikipedia. These are the states that have adopted it. Some states may have only adopted partial of the Uniform Probate Code, or may have mimicked it in certain areas and done something different in other areas. So it's important to know what your state does. These are some of the states that have adopted it, but your state might massage it a little. So you can Google and find the Uniform Probate Code, and that'll teach you kind of the process and the logistics of some probates there. Important case though, Payne versus Staley. This is in Florida. A Michigan attorney had a $3.7 million credit claim on an estate. So this was a big estate, right? And they did not abide by the Uniform Probate Code in Florida. They missed some timelines, and because of that, the Florida court, basically, the Supreme Court basically came back and said, yeah, you know what? Sorry that you missed out on your $3.7 million, but we as a state cannot train every creditor from every state in the 50 states on how they need to make their claims here. It's your job to learn our state's laws. And so that, can you imagine? I mean, a $3.7 million creditor's claim, they have a lot of money to fight. It's worth it for them to spend $200,000-$300,000 to fight to get this claim through so that they can get their $3.7 million. They ended up losing. That's case law in the state of Florida. So there's variations county by county. Sorry, I can only give California examples on this because I'm in California. But in LA County, if agents are going to list the properties, they do them at 5%. In Orange County, which is the county right next to us, they do them for 6% all day. The guideline, 10% deposit on court-ordered sales here in California. But in another county that's near us, right next to us on the other side, San Bernardino County, LA County, they're more flexible. San Bernardino County, they're very rigid on that. And I think it has to do with prices. LA County has higher prices, but don't know exactly why. Also, case by case, there can be some variations. Some judges are more strict. Some judges are more lenient. Sometimes they're doing something that the attorneys are going, I can't understand why this is happening in this case, but it can be different. Some attorneys want to review all of the paperwork for their client before anything is signed. That's why I say always sign the contract. After that, you can have them review stuff, but get the contract signed. That way you're in before they review stuff. And most attorneys, it varies. It's going to vary county by county, case by case, attorney by attorney, how they want the deposit check written. If they want to try to control the escrow, we have escrow in California. For you, it'd be closing agent. All that kind of stuff can vary different case. I'm getting close to the end, and I want to kind of start summarizing. So a probate timeline. I know this is hard to read because I don't really want you to read it. There's all these different aspects of a probate case that go on, all these different things that are responsibility of the attorney or the estate representative. The majority of the cases, all you're going to have to worry about are these two green boxes above the line. That's it. When the person gets put in charge, which is usually within the first 60 days, and the sale of the real property. We put this at 5 months. I mean, that can happen 1 week later, or, usually if you're doing a 30-day escrow, it's like 30 days later, but usually it's within the first few months for sure. That's it. If it's a court-ordered type of sale, you may have to worry about these two green boxes on the bottom, which is where some other things happen that may create a little delay or something like that. But the point is, you don't have to worry about a lot of this stuff. All the other things, they happen in the background between your seller and the attorney. So you don't have to be trained on that. You don't have to worry about all that. So probate is not typically that complicated. For the majority of the cases, they file in the court. They're appointed to be in charge. After they're in charge, they sell the property. There may be publication or different things like that, but they sell the property, and that sale is typically like a regular sale. Not that complicated. There are some idiosyncrasies you have to learn, but the biggest myth, a lot of investors run away from probates because it's too complicated for them, and they don't want to learn it. That's beautiful for, like Warren Buffett said, why is he such a great investor? Because he said, when everybody runs this way, I turn and run that way. You go counter to the market and you get to learn. So I have a great resource for you. And this resource is a half-day workshop that I'm doing Friday, May 15th. Take a picture of the screen because that's the link that you would go to book for this workshop. It's a half day. It's going to be might be 3.5 hours. It's going to start at 9 a.m. Pacific time. So if you're on the East Coast, that's 12. And I'm going to train for 3 hours on detailed information that is what gets you the deals in probate. A lot of what I said where people are missing, I train on that. Some of the things that Jason implemented. Now, fast forward this year, Jason's been in the business 3 or 4 years. He's probably closed 5 to 7 probates. How much money do you make on each deal, right? 5 to 7 probates in that time. He's making great money on it. He has a $2.6 million, is it $2.6 or $3.6 million possible deal right now in Bel Air. He has a couple $100,000 possible deal in the Inland Empire. And on all of these, the things I've trained him on how to stand out on the marketing side are what is getting him. He hasn't got the deal yet, but he's going to get the deal on these, and it's what's getting him the deal. So that's what I'm going to do is I'm going to train in that half-day webinar. Let me tell you a little bit about what's going to be covered in there. I'm going to cover limited authority or court confirmation or court supervised sales. I will not have the detail for all of you in every state. I will have the detail for California. Other states are going to mimic some aspects of that. So you're going to have to kind of massage that. Even if you said, I'm not going to even get on for the first hour because it's only going to be the first hour, that will be fine because the information I share in the next 2 to 2.5 hours is going to be phenomenal. So, but I think it would be very good because what I focus on this is some of the leverage you use as an investor specifically in getting these transactions when they're going through court approval. The underlying guideline is when there's court approval, they're looking at more stuff. They're looking at the price it sells for. They're looking at making sure it's not being sold underhanded or under the table to somebody. And so I show you how to make yourself stand out and still get the deal. And I cover some great case studies on that. I'm going to cover assignments. The assignment is the investor's #1 tool. People that have lost deals lose them because they don't understand that. I'm going to introduce you. Assignments are a full webinar on their own. So I'm going to give you an introduction to the assignments and what they are and how they work and how to get more information on those. And then I'm also going to cover 7 ways to make money in probate real estate. There's actually more than seven that I cover on this, but that's the name of I wrote an ebook called 7 Ways to Make Money in Real Estate. So I'll cover those ways in that webinar. And then the kicker, marketing, tips and techniques to things to do on marketing with the things that TANGIE showed you in the beginning. For 40 something cents, a company will send out postcards for you, including postage. That's freaking unheard of. And those are phenomenal cards. I've seen the ones that they tell you, those are great. And so you utilize those, you can get your marketing out. I show you a lot of minor tweaks and things that you can do to get your foot in the door solidly on a transaction. Man, I mean, you're going to kill it. So half-day webinar, really, really so expensive, $30. Right? It's going to be, like I said, 3 to 3.5 hours. I'm adding a piece on, especially for folks that are out of state, since the first hour is going to be a little bit California intensive. I'm making sure I'm adding a piece on towards the end, about 30 minutes. That's going to be all intensive for the marketing to help you guys that are out of state and are not part of the California market. That way you don't feel like you got shortchanged. It's a whopping $30, $10 an hour. If you guys don't think I'm worth $10 an hour, then more power to you in this business. But that's the webinar. So take a picture of this screen so you can book it. If you go to Probate Real Estate Sales 101, which is the name of my book and the name of my website, Probate Real Estate Sales 101, you can click on training. You'll see advanced probate training for investors, and you can book the webinar there. Otherwise, take a picture of the screen. TANGIE, with that, let's get to some questions. I would love to know what questions folks have for me.
Well, that was fantastic, Kevin. We really appreciated that. We do have several questions. We've got about 17 so far. We're going to get through these within the next, I'd say 15, 20 minutes. If for some reason we can't answer all of them, Kevin, you can be reached at, where can you be reached?
My 800 number is right here on the screen. Email is kevin@probaterealestatesales101.com. 800 number, 800-299-0709. Additionally, if you go to my website, that number and email address is on the website as well, so you can always find me that way.
Okay, well, great. Thank you so much. We'll also let you guys, if you want to email me too, and you have any questions about stuff I talked about earlier, please just email me, TANGIE@ForeclosuresDaily.com, or you can text me 863-698-3550. That's 863-698-3550. Let's get started with some questions. Kevin, aren't the iBuyers offering lowball dollars to purchase these homes? There has to be equity left on the table, right?
Very great question. And I'm going to answer that one second. Before I do, I just wanted to mention, if you call me, please be sure to leave me a voicemail. 1, because I'm old school. I'm almost 50, so I kind of like voicemails. But 2, because I get about 6 to 7 robocalls every single day. Between 3 in the morning and midnight, I get 6 to 7 robocalls. They're coming from all over the state. So sometimes if I don't recognize the number, I may not answer. But if I get a voicemail, I always listen to the voicemail. So do that. Now, yes, iBuyers. Now, in some areas, they are offering lowball offers. In addition to that, they also usually have between 7 and 9% as a fee. So they don't charge, they sell themselves. There's no real estate commission, which is true. There's no real estate commission, but there's a doggone 7 to 9% fee. Isn't that the same as paying 6% real estate commission or worse? So they do offer that fee. Now, they don't always offer lowball. I have a property in Las Vegas, and when I was going there one time, I saw Open Door there. So I went through the process to see, I needed to get details. So I went through the process, but I also tracked that property, bought the property for $287, which was market value. Properties in that area sell between $285 and the really sweet ones, maybe $300. It had brand new carpet, paint throughout, new countertops, and they painted the kitchen cabinets. You can't do that kind of work in a 2,100 square foot house for less than probably 7 to 10 grand. And they sold the property for $292. So they did not make the money on the flip. I think Open Door did that deal because they were trying to capture market share. So that's the problem, is in some markets, they may be trying to capture market share rather than trying to make money on the flip, because they also make money on all the ancillary services.
Okay. So I think that about answers it, Kev. Also, Joy wants to know what the difference is between a will and a trust. They sound the same.
Very good question. So a will basically has no impact or anything until I die, right? My will says when I die, this is what's going to happen. And it typically will dictate, when I die, give this to that person, give that to that person, do these things, make a gift to the foundation, etc. That's typically how a will works. But the will isn't used or anything while I'm alive. It really has no impact at all. I can't take my dad's will. My dad's still alive, thank God. I can't take his will and go to the bank and say, hey, this allows me to do anything. Whereas a trust, usually call it a living trust, a trust usually will have an impact now and when I die. Additionally, property that's held by the trust has to be titled in the name of the trust. So if I want my bank account to be part of this trust, I have to go to the bank with my trust and take my trust there and say, hey, take the property out of my name, Kevin Sayles, and put it in the name of Kevin Sayles, trustee of the blah, blah, blah trust. So there's a couple differences there. You have to title property in the trust, has to be titled in the trust. And then it does affect while I'm alive, and then it has more effect after I die. So that's pretty much the difference.
Okay. Living in San Diego, homes are fairly expensive, just like LA. How do you even enter the deal with larger wills competing against you? With larger what competing against you? Larger wills competing against you. Basically, an investor who has larger capital and larger money.
Oh, got it. Okay. Got it. Yeah. I mean, that's going to be tough no matter what market. I mean, whether you're dealing with probate, foreclosure, or anything, there's going to be other offerers. Now, the unique thing about probate is if you understand the process, you can help in there. I've seen people get the deal because the relationship they end up developing with this is something I'm going to talk about in my webinar in detail. An investor got this deal, great property, 700 grand. Because of the terms of his agreement, he made it more difficult for anyone else to get that property. And so sometimes you use the terms of what you're going to do. Sometimes you use your understanding of the process to do it. I've seen people miss out on deals because they don't understand the process. They don't understand what they should be doing. So your expertise in that process can help. Sometimes, and this is a big one, some of the things I teach about marketing is how you use your knowledge of the probate process. And if you're new to it, you develop the knowledge and how you use that to get with the person who's selling so that they understand you know more than anybody. Like, why wouldn't I work with you? Why wouldn't I sell to you rather than someone else off the street? But then the last thing I'll say is with probates, they have attorney's fees. They have fees filing in court. Obviously, California has some of the most difficult, challenging types of probates across the nation, and you're in San Diego, so you can help them with that. And in California, it's easy to tell them, "I'll cover, we'll cover the fees," because the fees aren't paid till the end. That they'll tell them you'll have no fees up front because the probate fees are not even paid till the end. So there's quite a few ways to do that. I cover that more in some of the marketing stuff that I do, so you might want to be on the webinar on the 15th.
Okay. Excellent information, Kevin. This person says, hopefully you or one of your partners can give us information on property structuring probates versus trust for commercial real estate in SoCal. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that sounds like very specific stuff that you're going through. And the thing about probate, two people can tell me a scenario that when you hear it sounds exactly the same. And then when I get into the details, there's a lot of differences. So you could reach out to me and we could talk specifically about that.
In terms of structuring, Tangie, I don't know if you mentioned it or if we talked earlier about it, but I wrote another book called The Wholesaler's Guide to Closing Real Estate Deals. That is not about finding wholesale deals. That is not about how to get the wholesale contract done. That is none of that stuff. This book is a far more advanced book that I go over 20 different ways to structure your transaction to be able to get your wholesale fee or your wholesale money that you want to make wholesaling in the deal. The reason why is sometimes there's barriers. You might have a contract that's not assignable. You might have a seller that doesn't want it to be assigned. You might have all kinds of different situations that make it challenging on how you structure the deal. And so I wrote that book because I said, hey, this information is not out there. Let me put it out there in a book. So one, you might want to pick up that book. It's on Amazon. If you Google my name, Kevin Sayles, Sayles has a Y in it, Sayles. If you Google my name, you'll find both of my books on Amazon, or you can go there and put in Wholesaler's Guide to Closing Real Estate Deals. But that's in there. So I have a lot of experience on structuring that stuff. And if you want to discuss with me, send me an email, call me, and we'll, get together.
Okay. So in California, what happens if the appointed person passes away? Does their child become the appointed person?
So I think you're talking about the person who's been appointed to be the administrator or executor. If so-and-so dies, then someone has to be appointed. If there's a will that tells who will be appointed, then that person is. If there's not, laws will dictate who's in charge, right? Or who has the ability to be in charge. And that's the same in all the states for the most part. If that person who's been appointed dies, then they'll have to appoint someone else. So they'll go back to that either succession law saying who's in charge, or they'll go back to the will if there is one, and the will might say, my son Johnny's in charge, and if he's not able, then my son Steve is in charge, right? And so, so they'll either go to the next in line based on succession laws or based on a will that might be in place.
Okay. How do you skip trace a dead person? Okay, so I'm going to answer that. I've been actually saving that question because I wanted to answer it live. And that's a very good question. A lot of people think, well, geez, if I'm working pre-probates, it's not going to have the personal rep's name, the address, or the attorney's information. It's just going to have the decedent's name. Well, here's what you do. The skip tracing company that we recommend will give you access to the link when you become a subscriber, and they'll skip trace the decedent's name for 15 cents. Keep in mind, it's 1 week after the death, literally 1 week. And we verify there's real estate attached, and we give the lead to you 1 week later. So somebody probably has that person's phone. I think we can all agree. And if you call that number within 5 to 7 days after the death, somebody's probably going to answer it. And not only that, the skip tracing company that I recommend, after you pay your 15 cents for them to skip trace the decedent's name and address and give you the phone numbers, if you ask them, and you have to ask, they don't do it automatically, for free, they will give you the surrounding family members and all of their phone numbers too in the same area. So you can reach out to the family members, and I give you the phone scripts on how to talk to both the person who answers the decedent's phone and the person who answers the family member's phone. So that's a great question, and you can absolutely skip trace the decedent. So that's the answer to that.
Amazing. Tangie, that is amazing. And if you guys don't realize it, she just gave you the goods. That right there is phenomenal, because that's the hardest part. Sometimes you have a deceased person and no one lives there anymore. How do you find them? So thank you for that, Tangie. I'm going to be emailing you about this after we have the webinar, Tangie.
Okay.
And one other thing I wanted to say about the death of someone that's been appointed, when I do the half-day webinar, I go over a case study. This is what I call a grand slam. This guy made a mint. He got the inheritance that was left. He's a door knocker. He knocked on the door. He ended up getting the inheritance that was left. He bought the deal, or his business partner bought the deal. He probably made $300,000 cash on that deal. And it was a situation where the person that was appointed died and didn't really leave anyone else around there. So, so it can be very lucrative when the person appointed dies.
Okay, and also, door knocking is really good. A lot of people think, oh my God, I can't mail a person or call a person that just died last week and had talked to the family members. That's just them being scared, and it's about people talking about their own fears. And here's what I tell people: when you work pre-probates, yes, it's only 1 week after the death. It's a very sensitive time, but as long as your marketing is politically correct, you shouldn't have a problem. You don't want to go mailing him a letter saying, my deepest condolences about your recent loss. My wife and I are working on our portfolio for our residual income for when we retire. That's terrible. I actually had somebody word for word put that in a letter and asked me to critique it. I completely just told them to 86 their letter. It was garbage. Don't ever say that, period. You want to be simple, basic, right to the point. Hi, I understand you may have a property for sale. If you do, I'd like to buy your property. I can close fast, cash, as is, in less than 30 days. You can even leave the unwanted items in your house. You don't even need to clean, update, rehab, or repair your property. I will buy it just the way that it is. Oh, and by the way, I can even help you pay for your probates if you need some financial assistance. That's my handwritten letter. It touches on all points. When somebody goes to the mailbox, they don't want to hear and have a negative emotion brought up in the human about somebody recently passing. They want to hear things like, I can pay cash, fast, close. You don't have to pick up. You don't have to rehab. You don't have to repair. I can buy now. Oh, and by the way, I can help you pay for your probates too. Now, what you want to do is hook yourself up with a local attorney that'll help you do these probates. And guys, if you're in Florida, there's a guy named Al Nicoletti. He'll do your probates and he'll only charge you filing fees in the beginning, and you don't pay for it until it's done. And he's getting these done in a couple of weeks, not months, a couple of weeks. And that's a guy in Florida, Al Nicoletti. So I mean, you need to find a local attorney in your area. They'd be more than happy to take this business. You're giving them business, you're doing them a favor. So it's like you're interviewing the attorney. How fast can you close on these? How fast can you get this in court? How much, can you take down just filing fees and I can pay you the rest when it's done? I mean, it's your job to interview the attorneys in your area to make this deal work for you.
Excellent.
Kevin, somebody wants you to repeat what you said about not being able to wholesale, because I know that my guy that offered to help pay for these people's properties got 5 wholesale deals in like 3 weeks. Now, obviously he had to wait for the probate process.
Yeah. So let me make sure I clarify. So in the full or independent administration, wholesaling is going to be no problem because those are just like a regular sale. If you're in a state where they have some sort of court supervised or court over, where the court has oversight over the sale, those are the ones you got to be careful on wholesaling. So for instance, most states will have the independent, and like I said, Texas is like 85% that go, or really high number that go through that independent sale. California is probably more like 60%, and 40% have to have court oversight. The reason you don't want to wholesale those is because they go into court. If you wholesale it, you got to wholesale it before you go into court, which means there's no actual valid contract in place and you've already passed it off to the wholesaler. So it's kind of a risky thing. Unless you're good friends or something like that with the person you're wholesaling it to. But the reason why is because once you go into court, they put in the court record who the property is being sold to. So you can't change that later. So that's why you can't wholesale those. On California, you can't. In your state, depending on how the logistics and procedures are, you may be able to. But like Tangie said, most states are going to have the vast majority of their sales are done with independent administration. And so those you absolutely can wholesale.
Yeah, it depends on if they have full authority or partial authority. And even on full authority, once they're named the executor of the estate, you can bring an offer almost immediately to a judge. It's up to him to say yay or nay, but you can bring an offer to him. A lot of times they'll just sign off. They usually want to know, hey, how much is the property worth? How much is the person offering you? Why are you selling it for so much less than it's worth? Hey, it needs a new kitchen, it needs a new roof, it needs this. The attorney I recently talked to said they just sign off, pretty quickly. So in North Carolina, because real estate isn't part of the estate, are there any special steps needed?
There absolutely are. So in North Carolina, and I don't work in North Carolina, so I'm going from my conversations with an attorney. We've had detailed conversations about this. Essentially, in North Carolina, the state will pass based on their intestacy laws. So if you look up the intestacy laws in North Carolina, which is probably going to say something like if there's a spouse or if there's a son, et cetera, it's going to pass directly based on that. So that means John Doe dies and you have the son of John Doe, you're going to deal with that person. They don't have to go to probate. They do lodge a will. Like we don't do that in California, so I don't even really know exactly what that means. But basically, lodging a will is like you take your will and you go file it with the court or something like that. We don't have that in California, so it's very different. But they basically lodge whatever will they may have, or if they don't have one, it passes via the intestacy laws. So the key you'd want to do in North Carolina is you want to look up the intestacy laws. Then when you get your pre-probates, now they're not going to have a probate court case or something like that, and you're not going to be competing with the vast number of people that are out there, because unless they're getting the pre-probate leads like you are, they're not going to even know that the situation is going on.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. We have about 37 questions and we have about 12 minutes to answer them.
I'll go quick. Let's do rapid, like speed dating type. I'll do it fast.
Okay. How do you find the exclusives? How do you find the executor for the estate?
How do you find the executor? So one, Tangie, you already answered that with the skip tracing. Two is, do all the normal things that you do for marketing. You're going to door knock. You might have to door knock next door to find the neighbor. Sometimes the neighbor goes, oh yeah, Steve died, but his son is in Texas. Here's his number. So all the things that you do with your normal marketing about finding people would be the same here. It's just that you're trying to find an heir. So it's a little more difficult. The skip tracing becomes very important.
Okay. What is your edge when dealing with seasoned investors going after probate leads? It seems like in my market, I'm dealing with some sharp shooters.
Yeah, and that's going to be tough competition. It's going to depend on their niche. Do you know what state they're in?
What state are, well, they didn't actually put their state in that one. When you guys ask
yeah, it will vary. Usually you use either, and I kind of answered this in another question, so I'm going to be short. Usually you either use procedures or your knowledge of those procedures, or how you approach the seller, or what you're going to offer in your terms. Those are usually what it is. So there's a lot to that. And that's the best I can say in a short amount of time.
What would you recommend for an approach if you are an investor versus agents? Well, I can actually answer that. If you're a realtor, you can get a lot of listings from these, especially if you're working the pre-probate side, because as a realtor, you have to watch out for the property already being listed on the probate side. So on the pre-probate side, chances of being listed are pretty much nil. It's like 1 week after the death. So as a realtor, this is a huge advantage for you. And do you have anything to add to what approach you might recommend for investors versus the agents? Kevin?
Yeah, so each one has its advantages, right? An agent has the advantage of, I'm going to expose it to the whole market, right? But the disadvantage is you got to pay 6% commission. As an investor, you have the advantage of, I'm going to close cash, I'm going to close fast. You don't need to do nothing, like Tangie was saying in her script. You don't got to do nothing to the property, but also you don't pay any commission. So each one has its advantages. And when I teach, everything I've ever done in my material is for investors and agents, because the conversation is going to be different, but the ultimate goal is the same. We both want to sign a contract, right? It's a different type of contract, but we both want to sign a contract. So the bottom line is if you're an investor, you use the things that you have as an advantage over the agent in your conversation with them.
Jacob Cap says, is there a specific cold calling script for probate specific, more so of a good opener? Because some of the people may be emotional and such.
Tangie, you covered that perfectly. Your script that you just gave, when I say perfect, it was absolutely excellent. Now,
well, that was a letter. You could use it like a script, but it was a letter. But I also give them a phone script.
Yeah, I mean, that what you said on that letter could absolutely be used on a phone script. It's very similar to the script that I teach. And you can interchange things and try different things. I think the best thing is always you get 100 leads from Probate Daily. On 30 of them, try exactly that. On the other 30, do it a little different. It's real easy to get that tested.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if it was me calling on a probate, pre-probate, it doesn't matter. When the person, if I'm calling the decedent's phone and a girl answers and a girl that passed, I'm going to assume it's the girl. Hey, Jan, this is Tangie. I was calling you because I'm interested in purchasing your property. Oh, I'm sorry, Jan passed away last week. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I know this is a really bad time, but while I have you on the phone, are you thinking about selling the property? And you just move right into your pitch. You don't know she passed, right? They don't know that you know that. So, I mean, and the same thing when you're calling the family members. When you call the family members and you say, hey, John, this is Tangie. I've been trying to get a hold of Jan for the past couple of weeks, but I can't reach her. She's not answering the phone or mails or anything. And they're going to say, oh, I'm sorry, Jan passed away last week. And the same thing, you apologize and you find out if they want to sell the property. Very generic phone call, Can you use terms on a probate deal?
Terms, I'm assuming that they're talking about like financing terms or terms like a seller carryback or something like that. Absolutely.
Like I'll hold the note or something like that,
Yes, you can. Now, normally the estates are not going to want to carry anything. Normally they're not, because they want to get out of their purpose for selling the property is to generate cash and they want to get out of it. But anything is possible. I just don't think you're going to find a lot of sellers that are going to want to do that.
If you are a real
estate, it just depends on the.
Sorry, Speedy, I thought you were done.
No problem.
If you are a real estate agent, how do you convince the court to let you sell the property as a realtor?
Well, and the court doesn't decide, and neither does the attorney. You have to convince the seller. So the same way you convince any seller to list a property with you, it's very similar. When you learn the things you need to learn about probate, you utilize those things to help convey why you're the best option for them. And again, everything I do is for investors and agents. So as an agent, I teach you this is how you're going to win that fight. As investors, I teach you this is how you're going to win that fight. So it's part of your learning, but it's not really any different than anything else. You don't convince the court, you don't convince the attorney. It's the seller that administrator or executor who makes the decision.
Can you do deals virtually, like if I'm in Maryland and do probates in Florida or California? Absolutely, right, Kev?
Yep. Just be
Virtual.
cautious of knowing the laws. The laws can be very different state by state, like I covered in the webinar.
How do you deal with probate when the only heir is incompetent?
The same. I wish I had the answer to that question, because how do I deal with my kids? How do I deal with my kids when they're acting like they're incompetent? No, I mean, so if the only heir is truly incompetent, like that, meaning they have a mental disability or a disease, or they're in a coma or something like that, then there's in the laws, there's going to be ways to handle that. In most states, there's either going to be an attorney that's appointed to represent them, or it could be a guardian. Like here, I have a client that needed help on one. The child was the only heir, and they were a minor, so they can't be the administrator. But the child's mom is still alive. It was the dad's property. So the child's mom gets guardianship and becomes the administrator of the estate. So usually if there's someone that's incompetent or doesn't have capacity, there's a way in the law in your state to be able to deal with that. That's not a complicated thing or not hard.
Okay. You mentioned terms is a good tool for use. Can you give a little more detail on structuring it?
Sure. For example, on one situation that I helped an investor, he was ready to buy like right now. And there was a lot of pressure to have other investors get in there. He used his relationship with the seller, like he had developed over time, a good relationship with the seller, to say, you don't really want anybody else going in there, blah, blah, blah. That helped him. But here was the big thing. This one was going to be one that was going for a court confirmation. So there was other investors that wanted to buy. He was putting down $300,000 or $400,000, some large amount. But he wanted to buy like right now, like I'm ready to close. I said, well, look, why wait for the court hearing? If someone overtakes you in this, because this was an overbid pro where other people could have taken him out of this deal in the court. I said, they have to take on your terms. So make your terms better. You're ready to close right now. He goes, yeah, like I'm ready to close. Like if they had a contract, we can close tomorrow. I said, cool. Then why do you have a 10-day escrow? Put a 3-day escrow. That most investors got to liquidate some cash. It's harder for them, right? I said, why do you have a 10% deposit, which is the guideline? You're putting down 300, so put all 300,000 down, write the check for the whole 300,000 now. Because now someone to overtake you has to beat your terms. Most of the time, remember I mentioned in the webinar, what's in it for the estate? The estate is going to say, we got a strong buyer. He's got 300,000 in escrow right now. They're going to want to do what's best for them, not go for two, bird in hand is better than two in the bush. So that's an example.
Okay, we only have a few minutes left. Kevin, what would be the cost to have you mentor me?
I do have a coaching program. So I have one-on-one coaching, which is expensive. It's about $3,000 for 6 calls. I don't have a whole lot of slots available for that. But I also have a group coaching program, which is much easier for people. If you want to know about the group coaching, you can email me. Basically, the group coaching is there's 6 recorded calls that are in my Facebook group. You listen to those. You get 2 30-minute one-on-one calls with me, plus a 10-minute call after each group coaching call. So you get a ton of one-on-one time with me. But in that group coaching, I take you through what it takes to get from the start to getting up and running. So it's a real good program. That usually runs around $1,000.
Is there a bidding? And by the way, that you can contact Kevin. His slide shows up there. Take a picture of it. It's got his email on there and the 1-800 number. You can call him and he'll also get back with you. Is there a bidding war in California on probates, Kevin? Someone told me that the courts in California accept 5% incremental bids on probate, and that just because you have the contract, someone else can put in a higher bid and take the deal. Is this true?
That's true in some cases. So on the full authority cases, which is probably 60% or more of probate cases, no, there would be no overbidding process. It's just like a regular sale. On the limited authority cases, which is going to be the first hour of the webinar on May 15th, on those, it is true. Yes, there is an overbidding process. And because that webinar is geared towards investors, I teach you how to know about that process and how to use that to your advantage, because there's other ways I don't want to say manipulate, because you don't manipulate anything. There's other ways you are strategic about your offer to make it unattractive for other people to try to come overbid you.
So it's like the foreclosures in North Carolina. You've got so many days to upset the bid. So there's a woman who is living in her deceased mother's house. She has a copy of the will and she has an estranged brother. If I went to offer to pay her for the probate, how would that work with her brother?
Well, and I don't know what state you're in or what the will says, but if assuming that both the woman that's living there and the brother are supposed to get a portion of this estate, they typically will have to share. I mentioned the assignments are the #1 tool. In that case, I would want to do an assignment. I don't know what state you're in. you might want to reach out to me, but an assignment would be the tool I would go for, because then you can put yourself in that case and be strong. And even if the brother is there, that he just gets his half. If you don't want to do that, or that's too risky, or you don't have the money to that, just buy the property. And the estate sells the property. You don't get involved in what happens with the money after you buy the property. All you do is buy the property. They figure out on their own in the background who gets what portion and all that kind of stuff. So you can either buy it or you can do an assignment. An assignment looks like a good thing to do in this case.
Do not call rules apply when you're calling the decedent?
Do not call rules apply, period. So, I don't think it changes just because it's a probate case or not.
Can you post the slideshow of your information for the upcoming May 15th one more time real quick?
Sure, it's right there.
So we'll keep that up for just a minute, and then he's going to put it back to his contact information. Daytona Beach, Florida. Okay, you're welcome. Got that? Are you going to be talking about Florida and Maryland during your training?
So in my training, so think about this. TANGIE gave a phenomenal script, right? Or a phenomenal letter that's on a postcard or on a letter. That would be the same whether you're mailing that in Florida or whether you're mailing that in California or in Minnesota or Maine, right? That script doesn't change. The second 2 to 2.5 hours of the webinar are about information that doesn't change where you are. So most of that is going to be geared towards everyone. The first hour to hour and 15 minutes is going to be about information about the limited authority sales in California. If you have court supervised types of sales in other states, like TANGIE just mentioned, the possibility of upselling in North Carolina, this information won't be, the logistics of that scenario won't be the same, but the concept and how you strengthen your offer so you don't get outbid will be the same. So the webinar is going to be for everyone, but certain parts of the information in that first hour are going to be specific to California.
Do you mentor realtors as well?
Yeah, I'll mentor anyone. So it doesn't matter. Like I said, if you want information about my mentorship program, there's my email again. You can email me and we can talk about that. I can give you the options.
New to the we're almost done too. We got 7 questions left. So I'm going to go ahead and answer them real quick. New to the real estate, and I just want to be a listing agent, not an investor. Should I go this way? I'm already farming 500 houses. I don't have another marketing budget. Do I need to have investors? So basically, she just wants to be the listing agent.
Absolutely. I mean, when people die, the property has to sell. That means it's a listing. So regardless of who buys it, whether an investor buys it or someone else, it's a listing. Probate is a phenomenal market for anyone that is looking to either buy or list real property.
Louisiana, what regulations are you aware of for Louisiana, if any? Where can I find this information out quickly?
I'm not aware of them in Louisiana. Louisiana is very different on the real estate side. So contact a real estate attorney. Hopefully they know probate, and you can pay for a consultation with them and ask them, or you can look up intestacy laws and or probate laws in that state. I don't have specifics on Louisiana. It's impossible. There's no one in the whole nation that has information on the logistics for the whole nation. So it's just too many variations. What
is this court situation like now that we are in this pandemic? I can actually help answer that. A lot of things are done electronically anyways through attorneys, so they're still being filed.
That is very true, and it varies county by county. Certain counties, the courthouses are closed, so it's delaying stuff. Other counties, they're open. So it's going to vary. You have to check in your county locally.
Is this seminar all we need to know about probate apart from slight differences in the states? I mean, can somebody just take the ball and just run with it? And here's what I tell people, Kevin, that any training you can give yourself is always important. And it makes you, better at what you do. So, I mean, if you're going to work probates and, you want to take advantage of some training, Kevin's definitely the way that you should go. He doesn't charge crazy amounts. As you can see, his workshop's only $29. I mean, you guys know the webinars we have on here, sometimes they'll be offering thousands of dollar training. Kevin's $29.99. You can go on a half-a-day workshop with this man.
Yeah, absolutely.
So join his workshop. I would recommend paying the $29.99, Ike, and just join his workshop. And if you want to take it further from there, you can take it further from there. But at least pay the $29 and get on that workshop. So that's pretty much all of our questions.
Cool. Just to be a real specific answer to that question. Yes, when you leave that webinar, if you're not too scared to go market yourself, you should be able to leave that webinar and start marketing to probate cases right now, right that second.
And one last question, is there a different training that you are offering for that webinar regarding California? You did that webinar last Monday. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. I don't know if they're talking about what I
I'm
said.
not sure.
We send everybody that purchases our services, Kevin, we send them a copy of this replay so that they
Okay.
can better understand things. So I'm not sure if they're talking about that or something else.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, but let's just answer it this way. The webinar that I have coming up on the 15th, look, I know with all the people that registered for this webinar across the nation, I know I'm going to have people across the nation. I already have people before this webinar signed up that are not in California. So trust me, I understand that, and there is enough value in every minute of that webinar for people that are in state or out of state. It's going to be valuable for you. You should be able to leave that webinar and start marketing yourself to probate that day.
Like he said, don't get discouraged. The first hour of his training is going to be about California, but the rest is all going to be about a vast array of things. And then he added an extra hour in the end, right, to talk about other stuff, he said?
Yeah, I added content on the end to talk about more stuff for the people that are out of state. And I also want to say this, even though the first hour is geared towards the logistics of a certain type of sale in California, there's going to be a lot that translates over to other states.
A lot of states follow the same rules and regulations, and sometimes they don't, but a lot of things are going to be the same.
Right.
I would do the whole thing, you guys, you know, because you might miss something in the first hour that it pertains to your state that you don't even know. So, well, you know, I want to thank you so much for taking your time out. We really appreciate you. I know how busy you are with your books that you're writing and your title company that you're working with and all these training mentors and classes and workshops you got going on. It's been hard to get you, and we're so glad that these hundreds of people that are on this call today got to hear everything you had to say. And we look forward to doing this again in the near future with you, Kevin. Thank you.
No problem. I love doing it. So thanks a lot for having me.
Have a great day, everybody. Be safe.
Bye-bye.